right. So, uh, I first have to start off by saying we have no show format here for what we're going to discuss. We purposely intended it that way. We wanted this to be an organic type of conversation. So, I'll just first start off by introducing myself. My name is Jason Derkevics. I'm the owner, founder of Grown by Nature since 2005. And I never envisioned myself to become a supplement retailer or working with supplements. I wanted to play professional baseball. Like that was my dream as a kid. So I felt like somehow after I injured my elbow and those dreams were kind of like put off on the side, that I was going in a different direction, and let's see what doors were to open for me. So when I was actually offered my own product company, my own product line. It was introduced to me by a man by the name of Dr. Eric Llewellyn, who this man is a nutritional genius. He was a member of the Royal Society of Health. He did work with the Prince Charles Committee, working with cancer patients and including a holistic approach towards their diets and supplements to avoid, supplements to include. So it was an eye opener for me to even understand that there was a difference in supplements. I mean, they all should have been healthy. They all should have been something that was required and useful for our body. When I was a kid, my mom used to make me have my vitamins before I went to bed because that was the healthy thing to do. Little did I know now that I was taking ascorbic acid, or I was taking D-alpha tocopherol acetate. Now, to the layman perspective, D-alpha tocopherol acetate doesn't exactly sound like apples and oranges. It sounds like something synthetically produced. So that's something that really eye-opened to me. What was I taking then? I developed quite a bad, I was a college athlete, and I developed a severe bladder infection, actually, because I think I was taking an overdosage of synthetic pharmaceuticals. I needed that competitive advantage over the next person. I needed something that was going to increase my performance. So I was taking 2 of the 1-a-days. I was taking creatine monohydrates. I was taking various protein powders. Like my whole diet and life was consisted around trying to improve my athletic performance. So I was taking supplements that by the handfuls at times. And I developed quite a bad bladder infection. So it wasn't until years later when I was introduced to Dr. Llewellyn, and he started introducing to me what these ingredients actually were that I had been taking, and he came to the conclusion saying you probably overdosed basically over a long period of time and created a toxic environment within your system. So that was my brief introduction to letting me know that I basically had no idea or understanding of what supplements were. And now this is the 20th year that I've been working with these nutrients. That is the most common thing that I'm coming across within the marketplace. Is there's a lack of information because there's so much misinformation put out there. It's purported by people that wear lab coats, and they say, here, try this one. This one is more complete from A to zinc, as the doctor links his fingers on the TV camera for Centrum. Or it's just a whole myriad of things out there within the marketplace that is misdirectedly proportioned, let's say. So people are either ethically putting out false information to sell their product, or they're simply naive to what exactly it is that they are selling. I'm going to turn it over to you right now, Amber. How did you get involved with this? How did you come to contact me a few months ago, where I was just blown away by, first of all, I get several people that contact me, ask me questions and stuff, but you had a different tone. You've been working with these same nutrients. You had the same history of understanding of what this grow company was, who Sud Abergnagi is, and who Andy Soleil, the founder of the company, was. And when you came to me with that knowledge, I said, who is this lady? And I need to know more. So my little tee up for you, if you'd share with me who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a certified nutritionist. I work with Ayurveda, had years with, yoga therapy, body work. So, needing to keep myself strong and healthy. But I mean, I've been in health food stores since 96, 93, 94. I was helped by a naturopath. And that was where my eyes opened up to, hey, there's a whole other world out there other than the MD world or even the DO world. There's a whole other world out there other than the pharmaceutical world. And I grew up in a small town with this little rinky-dink health food store that smelled like dusty carob and brewer's yeast, and you found treasures in the corner and tofu ice cream bars in the freezer. And so I grew up around that sort of unique and interesting exposure. I loved health food stores. My mother tried to make tempeh French fries for me, for a while when I was a kid. So I've had exposures to the health food movement. Tried everything. Did the whole fat-free craze in college and became so unhealthy that I started my own journey of what it meant to get back to real food, our addictions to sugar, the way our microbiome shift. And then just have always questioned the status quo. How is a multivitamin mineral formulation that is supposed to be stuff we're missing from food stark white and pressed in a tablet? Like, I don't understand. That looks like a baby aspirin to me. That looks like something, And so I went to my own path of herbalism, of cooking stuff from home, getting all these cookbooks. That led me to Ayurveda, which is very warm, nourishing, whole foods, food combining. It's very much about what you eat and how you eat it. So that's kind of always been my background. But I started to work as an educator about these kinds of whole food nutrients, which is a marketing term that has been allowed really since the first brand. I don't know if it was Rainbow Light or whoever, I remember that period of time just took chemical synthesized vitamins and industrial minerals and put them in with some fruit and vegetable powder. All of a sudden that was a whole food multi. I think it was better, right, than a white tablet. I think at least there's some food in it. It's kind of similar to like taking that with your food, where there may be some magic integration that happens, right?
Yeah.
And so then I learned this timeline, starting with between World War I and World War II, Albert Scant-Georgi, isolation of the vitamin that prevents scurvy in people on the front lines during wartime, during famine, during rations. Obviously, they had looked at it on ships when people are sailing for long times and they don't have access to fresh food. Scurvy was a big, problem. It's where you literally melt because your connective tissue can't reform because of lack of vitamin C. And so this was I think the first directive: figure out what causes scurvy, figure out what we're missing, figure out how we can put that in people's food where they don't have access to fresh food, and we can prevent this. So Albert Scant-Georgi was charged with that, and he took on that task, starting with citrus. Between World War I and World War II, citrus got too expensive, but I think he was Hungarian, he had paprika. And so finding that vitamin C in peppers, well, he found it effective, right? When it was like a black tarry gooey substance, still like a food, he was pushed to turn it into a white crystalline substance that could be marketed and put into anything. And, that's what he got the Nobel Prize for. And my understanding is he spent the rest of his life trying to give that Nobel Prize back and saying, hey, we missed the mark here. And I don't have an Oppenheimer moment where I'm contributing to people's downfall when we were trying to make things better. Right.
Yes.
And Andy Soleil, who personally, which I knew, he's passed now, rest his soul, picked up Albert Scant-Georgi's work and continued to say, hey, since everything became reductionist, pharmaceutical, and in Ayurvedic medicine, something that's single molecular, super directed, doesn't have any cofactors, is sharp, it's hot, it's rough, it's intense. And so some people do need that. They need that pharmaceutical intervention. I would say that it's like, some people, they're so tough skinned, they don't feel a mosquito bite, and other people feel this mosquito land on them. It's these different levels of sensitivity, different levels of toxicity.
Like that.
But if our supplement is supposed to give us what's missing from our food, why would it not look like food to our body? That's the question you asked yourself. That's the question I asked myself. That's been my journey all the way through. Why do we get so far away from food? What is happening to us? There are people who are allergic to food. There are people who are sensitive to food. There are people who can't eat certain foods. So I can see that they might need a pharmaceutical, laboratory produced, food-free nutrient as you work to heal them. But the rest of us, if we want efficacy in the nutrients that our body needs every single day, our cells better recognize it. And we don't have resources to spare converting something to what is recognizable by the body. So, I reached out to you, Jason, because I was just researching. I'm like, where did this Masood guy go to? Who was right-hand man to Andy Soleil, I think, and what scientific chief science officer or something like that. And where'd he go? And I come across your site, which I'd seen before. You were really the pioneer to bring all of this concept of let's turn a reductionist molecule back into food using microorganisms.
Yes.
So it's a microbiological farming that leads to microbiological cofactors that is basically like what your body does when it digests food, but it's kind of doing it for you. And this is really the only thing other than an extract of plants that we should, in this industry of natural health, be calling a whole food multivitamin.
I may just ask you a quick question, because you had just said missing from our food. What is your understanding of missing from our food? Why can't we just
That's a good point.
eating organic fruits and vegetables? Shouldn't we get nutrients that way? Like, why even bother with supplements? Isn't that a luxury type of mindset? Like, oh, here's extra nutrients. Why can't we just focus on?
Or like like our grandparents say, well, I never had to take a vitamin. Why should you? I don't understand why my kids and my grandkids are so sick. We were always well. That there are studies, and I know you know this, I'll just be the one to say it. There are studies that have been going on since 1960, I believe, measuring the nutrient content in food. And unfortunately, and I hate to say this, it doesn't matter if it's organic or conventional, it's all gone down by over 50%. Since 1960. And why? Okay. Everybody farmed all over the world. If they farm too long in one place, yeah, they could reduce the nutrients because it comes up in the plant. If you didn't have a method of returning plant material to the soil and further nutrifying it, eventually you'd farm yourself out of that location. That's throughout human history. The Romans did that. They plowed like 9 times a year and they farmed themselves out of a lot of farmland. What happened here after the nitrogen bomb was created is that this fixation of nitrogen synthetically, they figured out, hey, there's other things we can do with it. That turned into your synthetic fertilizer. Add a little phosphorus and potassium. It's all you need to make everything grow big and to create calories. So we're growing calories.
NPK, that's all we need, right?
Yep. We're growing calories and we're feeding people. But these huge corn stalks, these giant potato plants, these giant beet plants that are growing on this fertilizer are pulling all these nutrients up out of the soil. They're carted off the land, and then all the waste product disposed of in a landfill, instead of putting all that magnesium, all those other minerals, everything that's left over back into the soil. Now, my caveat, because people are like, oh, our soil's deficient in magnesium, nobody's getting enough magnesium. I agree. We're not. But it's not like there's no magnesium in the soil. And I think this is where I just want to make, like, I'm going to talk about some magic here and miracles, because every time you look at, every time you see a green leaf like this, there's magnesium in there, because magnesium is at the center of the chlorophyll molecule in a chloroplast that allows a plant that is chlorophyll dependent to take light energy and gas, CO2, and make matter, which is like magic, right? Like it's a miracle happening every moment. So if you see a field of beets and the tops are green, there's magnesium in that soil. Otherwise, it would not grow, period. But is there enough magnesium to do more than make big green leaves? Does the fruit of that plant have the magnesium? Does the beet itself, does the black bean, does the avocado, does the apricot, does the almond have the levels of magnesium and then all these trace minerals that would have been there prior to massive, repetitive, redundant stripping agriculture? So because the Green Revolution caused everything to grow bigger, it sucked up a lot of water, sucked up a lot of nutrients. We are a tilling society. We should know better. Every time I see bare dirt fields, it makes me cringe. I'm like, cover that dirt up, because we just have gotten into what's efficient and we're losing what helps us to optimize our health.
Now, you had mentioned that the green plant that you have right to the side had magnesium in it. Now, let me ask you, what type of magnesium is in that? Is it magnesium citrate? Is it magnesium chloride? Is it magnesium phosphate, sulfate? Which magnesium is actually in there? Because, I mean, I'm asking this question. I know the answer, but I just
Well, which one do you
assume.
think we can sell better, Jason? Let's just call it that one because, this
What's
little
that?
spiky whole leaf magnesium here. Let's just call it whichever one you think we can sell better because that's what happens and that's what you're getting at. Those are
Yeah,
citric acid on earth metal magnesium oxide will create mag citrate, and that is what is sold to you. That is not what's in your food. What is in your
exactly.
food would be magnesium bound to any of a number of amino acids that is in your protein containing foods, magnesium bound to any number of plant compounds or surrounded by them that would be in your plant foods. And the way that it becomes marketable, powdered, measurable, shelf stable, and marketable is to turn it into an industrial acid treated chemical and then
Yeah.
chemically artificially bind it back to an amino acid or a salt.
Yeah, there is actually over, I believe, 30 different types of pharmaceutical grade magnesiums that are sold out there. Sadly, not a single one of those is found in that green plant back there in that same form. It's bound to, as you were saying, earth minerals or something that's been synthetically altered, such as magnesium glycinate. That one popped on the market several years ago, and that was all the rage because, oh, it's a higher absorption. Do you know how absorption is actually figured out? What goes in your body versus what comes out. It's just sort of a subtraction process, but absorption doesn't equate to utilization. It doesn't, of
Oh,
course.
please explain that to everybody because that word is thrown around so inappropriately.
And absorption is the highest or the biggest selling point usually that marketers will hit. This one absorbs better. This one, well, absorption is only a small fraction of what that functionality of that mineral is supposed to do. Yes, it's supposed to absorb into your body, but it's also supposed to absorb into the cells where it's going to deliver said nutrients for your body's consumption. And since we're talking about magnesium, every single body's cell requires magnesium. It's the spark plug of every single cell's function. So if that magnesium that has been absorbed into the body is not being absorbed into the cells, it becomes basically virtually a waste material. So I don't care how good something is being absorbed or how well it's being absorbed. If your body has no utilization factor out of that which is being absorbed, what good is it for our body? It then becomes a byproduct where your body now has to figure out how to eliminate this now foreign invader to our body. So I'll turn it over to, for example, calcium. When calcium carbonate is the biggest selling supplement for calcium, my mentor, Dr. Llewellyn, he was doing research studies with people that were colon cancer patients, and when they extracted or did biopsies out of the lumens of their bowel, they found and discovered that these bowels were jam packed with carbonates because carbonates is what is, you were mentioning the word bound to the calcium in that rock mineral in the ground. So calcium carbonate upon digestion. I got to get strong, healthy bones. So I'm going to ingest my calcium carbonate supplement today, which is ground limestone, the same ingredients found in cement. Carbonate then becomes a byproduct from that very small absorbed calcium out of that product, if anything is being utilized correctly. But then that byproduct now is being lodged in arterial linings. They're finding in lumen of the bowel. They're finding carbonates up in brain matter tissues. That form is extremely important. So when you are mentioning, yes, this is a natural green plant to the side of me, and that magnesium is in a whole food form, I feel like that might sort of just get like over people's heads for how simple it truly is. And we can just then rectify a depleted diet by then taking the minerals out of the ground.
Right. So I think one thing everybody's talking about sustainability, Jason. What is sustainable about manufacturing, bottling, shipping, buying, and taking something, most of which wastes back into your toilet, sewage system, and septic system? Or it just isn't effective. There's nothing sustainable about that. And this is when you walk into a health food store or a vitamin store or anything like that, so much of what's in that aisle is wasted. So there's nothing sustainable about it if it isn't the right thing for the right person and properly bioavailable. So to me, bioavailable is a combination of absorption from the gut to the bloodstream, and then the ability of the cell to recognize and pick up and utilize that nutrient from the bloodstream. It's a combination of those two things, and it's how it's determined is different for each nutrient. So when you're talking magnesium, I think one thing that a lot of listeners might recognize is if you take a not very absorbable magnesium or too much at once, it stays in the lumen of the gut. Magnesium is very hygroscopic. It attracts like 9 water molecules to every atom of magnesium, and you get that flushing and it sends you to the bathroom. If you rush to evacuate your bowels after taking magnesium, you absolutely did not get it in your bloodstream. Maybe that helps your constipation, but you just put earth metal magnesium and whatever it was salted with back into the sewage system, right? So it didn't help your cellular functioning. All it did was attract water and flush you out. So knowing what form causes what is helpful, but it's still playing the game of, hey, if this were food, it would be different. Now, what's the problem with food-bound magnesium? Let's take it in, let's just call black beans. Okay, because you can't just chew on a dry black bean and get magnesium. You can't even necessarily just boil the black beans and get magnesium. Like there needs to be something that happens to release it in a way that you can actually get it into your bloodstream from the gut. So people are all about anti-nutrients right now, right? Like phytates, oxalates, and you shouldn't eat certain plants and you shouldn't eat certain plants raw because you won't be able to get enough of those nutrients because they're all bound up. Traditional diets have always known how to prepare foods to get the most nutrients from them. And so once again, my curiosity always leads me to, where are people living the longest, the healthiest? The blue zones is the most accessible information about that, right? Dan Buettner studied it. He wrote it all down. He's making $1 million on, recipes and stuff. But if you look at Okinawa, Japan, and the diet, if you look at Sardinia, Italy, Caria, Greece, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and you emulate the way that they prepare food. In Nicoya, they do not just take corn and grind it and eat it. They nixtamalize it. They ferment it. They add things. They turn it into something that is pre-digested so that they can get the nutrients from it. If they don't do that, over decades and over generations, people lose good health. And that you can see that in the fossil record of South America and Central America, right? So we have to know how to prepare foods. And so the whole even like, well, raw vegan, I'm going to put some, coconut milk from the cooler section of the health food store with some raw spinach, and I'm going to get my magnesium that way. That's just not doing it the right way. We're not cows. We don't have four chambers. We don't have the microbiome that breaks down cellulose. So we won't get everything from that. So we have to know how this car drives. We need to read the manual. But we are food dependent creatures, and we are sun dependent creatures. And if we're going to supplement, we should be getting more concentrated sources of those nutrients in a food-like form. And that's just always been my stipulation. And yeah, people are suspicious of supplements, right? Because they're like, well, my doctor said I need 1,200 milligrams of calcium, but I just heard on Dateline that people are getting calcium in their arteries and in their bones and joints. And, now my doctor says, don't do it. And is that the fault of the calcium? No, we need the calcium, right? What's that the fault of? The form, the cofactors. If you were getting it from fermented dairy from any milked animal and it were fermented, what does that do, Jason, to the calcium?
Enlighten us.
I mean, these studies are, I'm pretty sure they're even on your website. There are a lot of studies on calcium in a fermented form being so much more bioavailable. It's not only in a form that can be absorbed from the gut at the right rate, it's in a form that can be picked up by the cells, and it's in a form with cofactors that tell it to go to your bones and your teeth, not your artery walls, not your retina, not your kidneys, not your gallbladders, right? Not your joints, bone spurs.
What are cofactors for the person that might not understand that? Because without the proper understanding of cofactors, I'm likely to just go out and buy any supplement. But if I really truly know that food itself has cofactors, therefore my food supplement should have cofactors. What are cofactors?
Well, let's stick with this example of calcium, magnesium from fermented dairy. Okay. Once upon a time, there were no factory farms for dairy. Once upon a time, your dairy cows grazed the slopes of the Alps or Ireland or Michigan or Minnesota, and they ate only grass. And if they were in a winter climate, they ate rolled up grass and rolled up alfalfa. That is the food that they are meant to eat. They are not meant to spend all day eating corn. They are not, I've never seen a cow in a palm tree. So palm kernels for cows just doesn't even make sense, right? And so these fermented dairy from cows that actually graze on grass and have a healthy microbiome is full of K2, number one, which is the air traffic controller of calcium in the body. D3, you would already have in spades because you'd be out on the slopes of the Alps or wherever you are, out in the savannah of sub-Saharan Africa, wherever you are, getting sunshine, making D3. And when you combine the D3 that you made with the soured dairy from your cow or your goat or whatever, you have the K2 that they're making, the K2 that their gut microbiome is making from K1 in their grasses, the K2 that you might be making because you have a healthy microbiome, the D3 that you're making from being out in the sun. You put all these together, and the very bioavailable calcium, magnesium, and other nutrients, fat solubles like A and E and iodine would be important too, are all coming into your body together and the right ratios and with the proper cofactors and going where they're supposed to go. Now, countries that are very dairy consuming, like Sweden, have such impressive rates of osteoporosis because the source of their dairy has changed, just like here in the US.
It's interesting that you mention osteoporosis, because here in the United States, we take more calcium supplements than any other country throughout the world. And we have one of the highest rates of osteoporosis, even osteopenia towards bone cancers or Paget's disease. Dr. Llewellyn, he's done exceptional work with Paget's disease, nasty bone cancer, he was saying. And he said the only form of calcium that actually went back to bone tissue density was the Renatured or the Grow company, or what Grown by Nature offers with our calcium, is in that actual food form, because the other forms rob your body of other support minerals and nutrients. Because it's not phosphorylated when you take calcium carbonate, your body then liberates its own phosphorus from the bones, from teeth, um, to go try to make complete what is incomplete in our stomach. We are what we eat, you know, the old adage says. But if you're eating something incomplete, it's going to leave your body incomplete. So these rock minerals, when they're taken, they send signals to the brain, hey, there's some calcium in there, but it's missing this other form of cofactors, as we were mentioning before. So then your body tries to complete that which was incomplete, like I had just said. And where does that leave us? It leaves us incomplete. So when people are then told, okay, or they get some blood panel work done, and they're told that they're deficient in this vitamin, this mineral, then they're just left to basically go to the store or the pharmacy and to go pick some of that up themselves. Like, what forms should they be ingesting? And as we're talking right now, only whole food nutrients in their proper packaged delivery system can actually replete that which is depleted within our diets.
Absolutely. You know, it's kind of like you're going to build a house and you go get a kit for a modular house, or like you go to IKEA to pick up a bunch of stuff and there's like several boxes to put that piece of furniture together, and you miss some of the boxes. So you get home and you're like, I'm putting together a futon or whatever, and you forgot to pick up, you got box A, B, and D, but you forgot box C, and you're partway through it and you're missing that box. So you can never put it together completely. It doesn't stand up. It doesn't stay together. This is what we're doing with our bodies, with these supplements that have, it's like, oh no, you know, the legs are here, the seat is here, you know, I've got the back of the seat, I've got the mattress, I just can't find these little screws that hold it all together, right? And so there's something that's missing, and you're not going to be able to put it together with that. And so, as you said, you rob your own body. And I think people have heard about that. You take a isolated free-form amino acid, you want to take I don't know, say you heard that lysine will help you with cold sores, so you just go get some lysine, you know. And a lot of times people in the health food stores will say, hey, you should be taking a whole amino acid form or a protein to make sure that you're getting everything when you're, or even with B vitamins, you want to take B6, be sure you're taking a B complex, right? Okay, so people will inform you about that, but it's what we don't understand is that there's so much more to food, and you just can't replace it. And in my perspective, our bodies and nature knows how to do stuff. Just give it, just let go of the reins. Just give it what it needs and let it do it. And so, grown by nature using grow nutrients and continuing since what, 2005, to use those same grown nutrients, which means they're put together in a complete form with cofactors by a bacterium or a fungus, a yeast cell. And that is exactly what our gut is supposed to do when we eat food. It participates in this process. That's exactly what the microbiomes and the microbes in the soil do, so that the plant can get the nutrient. You and I, Jason, are just like this plant. In fact, we need, maybe not this one because I'm not eating it, but out there in my pasture, we need the exact same microorganisms in our gut as are in the dirt. In the dirt, it helps the plant pull those nutrients into its cells and makes that plant healthier, have better immune resistance, be more nutritious, produce more vitamins. Vitamins it produces to defend itself from the sun or the cold or, you know, the drought or the wetness, the fungus. We are the same. It's not metaphorical. It's not an analogy. We are the same. And we have destroyed our microbiomes through what? Antibiotics, medications, all of that, stress, lack of sleep. Our guts aren't doing it. So even if the food had the nutrients, could we even get it? But what has happened to our farmland, what has happened to our food, has happened in our guts and to our own cellular physicality as well. They are equivalent. And if we want to save ourselves, we have to save the soil. And meanwhile, we need to supplement I guess the way I've been always educating on this kind of a nutrient, especially when it is the whole supplement, the entire formulation of vitamins and minerals has been through the appropriate bacterial or fungal cultivation or both. This is like putting your nutrient back through an external microbiome so that by the time you eat it, it is in the form as if you yourself have a healthy microbiome and are consuming healthy foods. It's the best version of vitamin and mineral for the most sensitive among us who have the most gastrointestinal problems. White tablets that are supposed to be a multivitamin. When I look at the cheapest stuff out there, Equate, Centrum, you know, I see a chemical that can have a harmful or more harmful than beneficial effect on our microbiome, and that doesn't look like food to me at all. If you take it with a meal, you might have less harm and you might get a little more good, but we know everybody doesn't do that. So what is different about grown nutrients that are used and grown by nature? How did those chemicals get turned back into food, and what was that process?
Well, I really appreciate that question because honestly, it's one of the biggest misconceptions out there is that you can just simply go and take another supplement. And why does grown by nature exist? I exist because I have to, because I felt that I was given this information to share with the world. This information is not just simply which one is better for you. No, which one is going to possibly cause cellular death, cause mutagenic properties to our DNA, versus which one was actually going to feed your body's cells and perform the function of being a supplement for our diets. And let's go back to the beginning where this mess all began. You had touched base before with Albert Szent-Györgyi, who won the Nobel Prize for his isolation discovery of ascorbic acid. And as you mentioned, as he broke down from this stage to that stage, and finally to a white crystalline powder, well, what was left was basically the skeleton or the shell. Ascorbic acid is the skeleton basically of the vitamin C biological complex. It's
like a scaffold, like an exoskeleton off of a cricket.
Exactly. Go back to your analogy of buying the sofa that didn't have the backing or didn't have the screws to hold the thing together. I like to use the analogy of a car. We're told that vitamin C is ascorbic acid. It's like going to shop for a car and they hand you a steering wheel and they say, well, here's your car. Well, where's the rest of it? Like there's something missing in that. So as Albert Szent-Györgyi broke it down process by process to the last final end skeleton with the ascorbic acid, he discovered that along the way, it started losing all of its actual vitamin activity. The first little bit that he first broke down from the paprika, it had some good biological activity, but it was a gummy substance. And then as it went down further down the line, it became virtually useless for our body to consume. Ascorbic acid is most commonly used within the food industry to preserve fruit juices or to maintain freshness. Its definition within the industry is it's as a preservative, and we're told to stay away from preservatives, but it magically becomes healthy when you call it vitamin C now. But the
Can I ask
actual
you a question about that? So if somebody sees a Capri Sun or some kind of a fruit drink and it says contains vitamin C, and you turn it around and you see that it has ascorbic acid as one of the last ingredients and it has a milligram amount, is that vitamin C? Can a parent honestly believe that that fruit drink with sugar and flavoring and ascorbic acid has vitamin C in it?
No. Well, it does have possibly some vitamin C from the actual apple juice or whatever it was that's there, but the additional of what they're putting in there so they can label with added vitamin C, that's not vitamin C, ascorbic acid. And this was done, and we have the research posted on our website showing that I think it was the I'll have to find out the exact source of it. But what they found was that 1,000 milligrams of ascorbic acid had virtually no antioxidant property in vivo when ingested inside the body, but it was an antioxidant in vitro in a petri dish. So outside the body, in a controlled experiment, it was shown that it had antioxidant properties. That's why they put it into fruit juices to stop the,
Pre-sliced apples.
yeah, exactly. So it stops the development of the breaking down of that fruit. But when you ingest it, it does not provide our body now. It doesn't have a silicone chip within it that now I'm ingesting this. Now it's supposed to be healthy for me, providing health vitality for my body. Um, it's a living complex, vitamin C. It provides our body like life-giving energy, where ascorbic acid is basically a dead chemical, which helps preserve by functionality the fruit juices that it's added to or the apple slices that's added onto. So from that research and the Nobel Prize that was awarded, there was a young student that was with him. His name is Andy Saleh. We mentioned him before. He was a Hungarian benchmark scientist, and he escaped the Hungarian revolutions in the 40s. And he came to the United States, and he found refuge within the United States. He found the freedom from the Hungarian Revolution. His story is really remarkable. What he had escaped. It's saddening. It's heartbreaking, actually. And he wanted to give back to the United States because he came over here, the most civilized country upon the planet, and they were ingesting rocks and chemicals for their health, because that whole Albert Szent-Györgyi train that got set in motion to the pharmaceutical industry. And you mentioned Albert Szent-Györgyi was saying, no, don't say that's vitamin C. It's not vitamin C. It's ascorbic acid. It's completely different. They say, hush, hush. We already got this to the market right now. You're not going to stop this train that's rolling right now. The almighty dollar was, over ethics and morals at that point. So Albert Szent-Györgyi's student, Andy Saleh, went to work saying, I'm going to replicate his work, but I'm going to create an actual supplement that is a whole food supplement. So he got to work. How can he incorporate these nutrients back to the living cells of these plants that are growing? And he found that Saccharomyces cerevisiae, a single-celled plant organism, was actually had very unique qualities in that it had active receptor sites, meaning that it was like a hotel with vacancy. It had rooms to rent. So whatever you were feeding it, it was able to extract the important mineral out of that ground mineral salt and leave behind the byproduct, and then ingest within that cell structure. So now you had, for example, if they were feeding the yeast or the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, if they were feeding it a calcium carbonate, it was able to take the calcium and ingest the calcium and leave the carbonate out of the process. So that calcium then became an enriched calcium yeast. So,
and the carbonate went where? In the medium, right?
Exactly.
And that gets filtered off, and it's not somewhere in your gut. It's not somewhere in your blood, your arterial wall.
So Andy Saleh, reportedly, it took him 17 years to figure out how to complete the first growth procedure with selenium. So with the selenium salt, now let's take, for example, what is sold on the market, sodium selenite. Sodium selenite is actually banned in some countries for supplemental use because it's used to, or it's known to be a mutagenic, or it causes mutagenic cell properties within the living structure. So it could be a marker for cancer causing agent, sodium selenite. When it is just taken out of the ground, refined into a powder, put into a tablet, and said, now this is your healthy selenium because your body is deficient in selenium. So people
which you could get in 3 Brazil nuts.
Yeah.
But you're taking it because you need an antioxidant, or you have some prostate issues or whatever.
Yep. So with selenium, he finally figured out that after 17 years, and he said, Eureka, I finally figured it out. Let me move on to the next one. And the next one that he tried, it took him another 3 years to figure that one out, because there is a unique set of proteins and everything that associate with each vitamin and mineral. So he had to figure out the different procedure, the different process for that. So it took him over 20 years before he was able to put out a full product line. And that's when he began his company called the Grow Company. And they've been in operation within the United States since 1977. They are organic. They have all non-genetically modified materials that they stringently make sure that that's the case before it gets used for their batches. At the end of every batch procedure, they heavy metal test it. They do every sorts of certificate of analysis that you would require and then some. They govern themselves beyond the standards that they themselves are held accountable for. So they are believers in the purity of the project or the product to make sure that for the consumer, you're getting an actual whole food nutrient that is not going to be a toxic form for your body. So, for example, sodium selenite we just mentioned, or you look into vitamin A, which doesn't naturally occur by itself, but beta carotene. But vitamin A palmitate is what they're using as a fortification tool. For example, every offering of milk that I see, it says fortified with vitamin A and D. That vitamin A palmitate is actually one of the worst that I've researched, showing that it causes cellular death, mutates DNA cells, and it was given like a 9 out of 9 for like a danger as a chemical. So, but that gets flooded in everything. You look at chromium picolinate. That's another form of an isolated form. And they use picolonic acid, which is an herbicide. And a lot of, I believe there was another country that outlawed that. But here in the United States, we're pushing it out, saying these are the healthy forms for you to use.
Gotta use
And,
everything.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Gotta use everything. We had some of picolinic acid sitting around, gotta use it,
Yeah, what else are we going to do with it? Let's just dump it into this pill form right here and call it healthy. So, I like I started my conversation. I felt like I was led to this. I was given the truth in what this stands in it, and it kind of was a test. Like, am I going to go and fight the giants, the pharmaceutical big pharma operation, or am I going to put my tail between my legs with what I was told and say, well, I don't want to get into that trouble. I'm not looking for trouble, but I'm looking to share the truth out there, because to know that somebody is taking a supplement thinking that that's going to be possibly the healthiest thing they're doing for their body that day, but it's actually pushing their body further out of balance, possibly towards a carcinogenic homeostasis within their body. I don't want to deal with that information that I wasn't able to share with people. So when I'm introduced to someone such as you that had that same mindset, I'm glad we can do this type of show, because there's so many topics we can cover. There's so much misinformation out there. And I mentioned to you that I run some sort of a Facebook page. It's called Supplement Cops. And that's because there needs to be some sort of a supplement cop standard out there, because there's false marketing out there. You got people that are claiming their foods are whole foods, or they're claiming that this one is just simply better for your body than the other one. Or you have the Juice Plus reps that are going around saying, no, this is a whole food powder. I said, well, what do you think that plus stands for? Because I know what it stands for. In their own marketing literature, says juice, but the plus means the added nutrient synthetic fortification that they're adding in there. And then they'll come back to you and say, oh, well, it's NS certified. I said, you know what NSF certification means? It means that what is on the label is what is in the bottle. It doesn't guarantee that it's pure. It doesn't mean that it's non-toxic.
Or, yeah. And our people, our listeners, we know you don't know. We expect that you don't know. This is not your field, right? This is not your field of expertise. This is something that you, Jason, have been fascinated about, that I've been fascinated about, that we have made our mission to understand. For me, it's like, well, what came before that? What came before that? I'm always like reaching further back, like, where in nature would I have? The only reason I would chew on calcium carbonate in nature is if I was pregnant or starving and I had pica. I had a mineral deficiency that caused me to eat dirt or rock or brick or poop, or, like, that's the only reason you do something crazy like that. Now I've seen people drink water out of a mineral spring that to me might taste like, oh my God, this tastes crazy because it has so many crazy minerals in it. Might even have metals, might have lithium, but there are people who will crave that because their body is missing it. But that is the only circumstance that you would consume those inorganic forms. If you were eating an animal food or plant food, it will be in an organic form, meaning a living matrix. And so what you just described that Andy Soleil figured out how to do was take an inorganic chemical form. Pyridoxine HCl is not B6. Vitamin B6 comes in many forms, and every food that has B vitamins in it, it's not just one form, it's not just one molecule. It has cofactors attached to it. So pyridoxine HCl is not B6.
No, it's a petroleum ester, which gets processed with formaldehyde.
See, you're the sciencey one who gets to say that. I love it because that should wake you up, people. Like, your country allows brands to label their product and say that pyridoxine HCl is B6.
Or B12, cyanocobalamin, which is another petroleum ester, which gets processed with cyanide.
Or even methylcobalamin, which is better, more recognizable, but is not the whole picture of what B12 is in the food that you would eat or in what your body makes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of nutrients that we need to function every day. We can't expect the listener to know what each of them is and what the best form is. But the concept of let's take a micro or single-celled microorganism, it's Lactobacillus bulgaricus, right?
Yep.
Or Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and let this single-celled living organism renaturalize this chemical compound. I look at it as like, there's research now where you've got bacteria or algae or fungi that can take plastics or toxic waste dumps and turn it back into something that's neutral or even beneficial. This is, you can't eat rocks, but fungi and single-celled organisms in the soil can take rocks, turn it into a tiny particle, enliven it, wrap it in a living matrix, make it available to the plant, which then attaches it in a living matrix that you consume or that your cow consumes. And then you get the next product of that from the milk of the cow or the meat or the fat of the cow, And so these are the things that we humans are meant to eat. And so the name of your company, Grown by Nature, not grown in a laboratory, not grown in a petri dish, not put together in a beaker, but as our body, as our cells, we're meant to consume it. So it's a mission for you. It's a spiritual mission. It's a mission to maintain this vessel, this vehicle, which we inhabit with what is not the end result of we are a light inside of a car, and how do you maintain that car and how do you keep your light burning bright? Well, you better give that car the right fuel.
Now, we were talking Nobel Prizes before in the history with Andy Soleil. One of the things that really struck with me was in my first meeting with him, and basically here was a 90-plus-year-old man still showing up to work 8 hours a day. He was simply taking his own multivitamin. He said he was taking like 8 multivitamins a day of his own, and that's all he took for supplemental form. But this man was in his mid-90s, still showing up, working operations at their grow company. But he shared a story with me that they actually tried to buy him out, the pharmaceutical companies, that they were offering to buy him out. And he asked them, well, what were you going to do with this company? And they basically said, well, we're going to shut it down because you're one of our biggest competitors. So he said, thanks, but no thanks. Even the amount that they offered was astronomical, but he turned it down. Now, because his heart had wanted to give back to the people. So that's where he came at this from, a pure heart, wanted to give back to the people, stop eating the rocks, stop eating the chemicals. But then he shared a funny story about how a man won a Nobel Prize in 1999. His name is Gunther Blobel. He won the Nobel Prize in Physiology for stating that proteins have intrinsic signals that govern their transport to and localization within the cell, which basically means that these proteins that are bound to our foods as we eat them, they act like chaperones or taxi drivers. So there's signals coded within these proteins that relay through our signals within our brain, through our gut, that say, hey, here's some protein bound magnesium, or here's some protein bound vitamin C for you. And then the body sort of makes deal with, okay, well, let's get it to the right location. Your liver needs some vitamin E, your bones need some more calcium. So these proteins actively transport these nutrients throughout the body. Now, what is this all? Why am I bringing this up? Well, because without that protein or that vehicle cofactor, the means to transport these nutrients, without those protein chaperones, what you're going to find in 99% of the brands on the market, if it doesn't say grown by nature on it, you can rest assured that it's an isolated form, or it's mixed with some form of food. But still, as the body can't be fooled as we can as consumers when we buy a product off the shelf. The bottle says whole food, but when you ingest it, the body says, okay, yes, there was some whole food, but there's also this synthetic powder that got mixed into it. How is my body going to utilize that? So without the protein structure, that's when you start finding these nutrients then aimlessly floating throughout the body. They don't have the proper delivery system to the cells. They don't have the proper system to actually get outside of our body once it's deemed that they're not utilizable. So Andy Saleh, that was one of his things, was and Masoud Arvagnagi at the time backed him up and saying, and that's what Andy's been saying for the last 15, 18 years. He didn't get a Nobel Prize for it. He just began a company with it. So he is working with this type of understanding that he understood that these proteins and these nutrients, the way that they're actually structured, is the way our bodies requires it. Because if you're going to just treat your body as a hopper and just keep adding in all these synthetic forms, like I said, we can fool our brains, but our bodies don't get fooled the same. They're not going to receive those nutrients. It's going to cause adverse reactions within the body, imbalances in other forms, leaching out other minerals if you're taking the calcium carbonates or these other forms of nutrients. So I have to put my hand over my heart and just thank that man for the way he stepped into the ring and the way he defended his nutrients. So I'm trying to do the same exact thing. And I tend to get very passionate within the subject because there is so much false information out there. There's people out there saying, oh, we know that whole foods are the best. So we're selling a whole food product out there. But when you turn the back of the bottle around, you actually look at the labels. If you're not seeing actual ingredients of food listed for each nutrient, well, where are those nutrients coming from that are being listed on the label? And then you look at the text of the ingredients and you'll see stuff that you don't recognize. Pyridoxine hydrochloride, cyanocobalamin, folic acid. Folic acid doesn't even exist, as you had mentioned to me at one time. Share some more about that.
Right. Yeah, we were just talking about that a little bit, off camera, is that, we know that folic acid is needed to prevent neural tube defects and other birth defects that happen from incomplete transcription of DNA as your little egg is going to a little embryo and into becoming a new human being, right? And many other things. So folic acid is in every prenatal, but folic acid is not in your food. And folic acid is not in you. So here we are already accepting that we're going to take in something that has never been in the food that we eat and is not in us. And somehow it's going to magically turn into something that can, be a part of us. So if you eat foods that are rich in B9, they will not only bring that vitamin to you in a form that is recognizable by your body because of all the history of the human body consuming food. Additionally, that food will contain fibers that will feed your microbiome, that will allow your microbiome to produce more of it as well. So not only are you getting it it's encouraging you to make more. And if you're pregnant, you have more bifidobacteria signaled by hormones, which are going to take more of that leafy green and make more folates, of which there are, I think, 9 forms. And folic acid is not one of them.
It's similar with the vitamin E. There's
Yes.
companies out there that realize that there's many parts of vitamin E, similar to the story with vitamin C, how ascorbic acid is only one fraction of the whole vitamin C complex. The same thing with vitamin E. D-alpha-tocopherol acetate might address one synthetic portion of the 8 or 9 components that with vitamin E. So what do? They take simple ingredients, the 8 or 9 of them, they put them together and they say, here's your full spectrum. But that's not the way your body's going to receive it. It's going to receive it as 8 or 9 different foreign materials. Let's get rid of this as quick as possible. And that's going to be the effectiveness of that supplement, because there's something about when they all appear together in that same structure, when they all are interwoven like the fibers on a sweater, like if I hold up an apple, I can't show you where the vitamin C or where the calcium or magnesium is in that apple, because it's all bound within the proteins and the carbohydrates and everything that is carrying food factors within those nutrients. So it's sickening when you see the folic acid being pushed out there, but people that know, they're saying, no, stay far away, especially if you're pregnant.
Right. I mean, folic acid goes, so here's the trick. You can read a bunch of studies that say folic acid is the fastest absorbing form of that B vitamin. And that's what it's sold on. It's the fastest absorbing form. Why would I want anything else? Okay, so it got from your gut to your bloodstream. Now where is it? Well, the first place it goes is your liver. Now your liver's like, well, here's a naked chemical. I got to do something with this to make it usable. The liver has to use very sacred methyl groups, which it needs to detoxify to make that folic acid safe and then potentially usable, if at all. If you ate your leafy greens, which were rich in folates, they don't get absorbed so fast. They're in the gut, the microbiome's munching on them, and you get conversion at the gut lining of these forms, letting them, giving them a little like key and letting them pass through the lining and into the bloodstream, which gives them a little key for transport to get to a cell, to get into that cell to be utilized. They don't go to the liver. The liver doesn't have a part in that process in this particular vitamin's case, right? But if it's a toxic chemical, the liver is involved. So if it's D-alpha-tocopherol acetate, it's a toxic chemical. The liver is now involved. If it's a synthetic beta carotene, it's a toxic chemical. The liver is now involved, right? If it's a sodium selenite, it's a chemical compound. The liver will be involved in that. Your detoxification systems of some sort will be involved in that. And you talk about like bladder issues. I mean, anything that is super fast absorbing, super water soluble, and isn't being picked up by the cells goes where, Jason?
Very true.
Into your bladder and sits there and irritates that very delicate lining. And many people can cause, if not just irritation, you've got women with incredible bladder pain. You have cystitis, interstitial cystitis. You have pelvic pain. I mean, these are just all the things that, I mean, if that's all you get is that it goes into your bloodstream, which goes to your kidneys, which puts it in your urine, and your bladder starts screaming, that's at least the canary in the coal mine, right? That should be the first indicator. I don't feel good when I urinate. I'm hurting in my lower stomach. You're lucky if that's what happens, because that means you got the signal that this doesn't feel good. If you can trace it back to what causes that, you're lucky. Most people just that slips by, and the next thing you know, cells are mutating and you're over the years developing cancer, or it's backing up into the gut and that's having a problem, or because of your deficiencies, because you're not really supplying what your body needs, cells are not replicating properly, mistakes are being made, and because your liver is busy turning chemicals into something that's less harmful. There's just so many possible outcomes. We're surrounded by so many chemicals every single day. Don't take it willingly. Don't choose a chemical. Choose food. And then another thing that I just think, and I use this slide to train on why something like what you have at Grown by Nature through Grow Company doesn't come in 1,000 milligram doses of ascorbic acid. People, would you consume 44 tomatoes to get 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C?
I wouldn't.
I mean, who
I
would? How could you? 14
could.
oranges. Yeah, people can do that in orange juice. So that's 1,000 milligrams. But if you actually did it from 14 oranges or 44 tomatoes, you would be so overdosed because it's the whole compound. When it's ascorbic acid, it doesn't work the same way. So 1,000 milligrams becomes necessary to get any effect that is reproducible in a clinical study. You need 1,500 milligrams of calcium because your doctor said so, because you're osteopenic or osteoporotic. Well, have fun with your 20 cups of raisins. Have fun with your 30 sardines. Would you ever eat that?
Daily.
Never, never. You wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't do it. 66 peaches for, the IUs of beta carotene that you would need to get a standard dose of 400 IUs of vitamin E. You need to drink 10 cups of olive oil. You're going to
That,
be in the bathroom for a while.
that all?
That's all. 33 sweet potatoes. Good luck with your glycemic index. We don't eat like this. You're not a gorilla.
If you don't mind me, if I could just throw in a quick little story within this is the old Total cereal commercials. You're familiar with them, right?
Yes.
Because it sounds like we're stacking up peaches, we're stacking up this. How many of these would you require to get all? Well, anyways, the way the commercial went was how many bowls would you have to eat of the competitor cereal to get one bowl of Total cereal? Well, Total cereal is made by General Mills, the same company that makes Wheaties. If you put the box side by side, you read the ingredients, you say, whoa, what's the difference between this one that only has 20% listed of this vitamin, while Total lists 100%? This one only has 3% of iron or riboflavin, whatever they're listing on the box of Wheaties, but Total is 100% down the line. Well, what's the difference? Well, Total cereal was using the synthetic fortification spray on top of the Wheaties. Now they market it for, it only costs them maybe like 40 cents or whatever extra per box for material to spray, but then they were charging a premium price for it. So that same fortification system, which is still actively used today, any type of bread is enriched or it's fortified. When you hear those terms out there, run from them. Fortification, enrichment, like if it wasn't there to begin with, you can for surely be certain that it's not there today because they added it into the product. But you can't eat an egg, you can't eat some flour and expect your body to make a cake within your stomach. That's what they're offering, is these isolated ingredients, thinking that your body's going to magically utilize it in a correct way. But that Total cereal commercial just came to my mind as you were stacking up peaches and all that, because I do use some of those comparisons, but in a truthful way. For example, our vitamin C tablet provides 5 or 6 organic oranges worth of vitamin C, but it isn't the full biological vitamin C complex. It has the active branch chain amino acids as the cofactors. It has the complex carbohydrates associated with it. It has the protein structure. So when you ingest our Grown by Nature vitamin C, that vitamin C has that proper protein signaling that can transfer information back to your body as your body receives it. And that vitamin C can go along its merry way within our bodies. But the most important thing is that protein structure. And if you think back to what I said with Gunther Blobel, the verbiage within it was that the proteins have intrinsic signals that govern their transport, actively transport to, and then the localization within the cell. The localization within the cell is the final destination, most important part. Those proteins have like little skeleton keys where they can access our cells to deliver that vitamin C. So you actually get within the cells the vitamin C or the magnesium or the iron or the GTF chromium. potassium, whatever it is that is attached to those proteins, they have the little skeleton key to get to our body's cells to deliver. Without that protein structure, without that key, even if it got to its site of destination, it doesn't have the ability to enter the cells.
And while something like magnesium glycinate, which is very tolerable by so many people, is very popular and it's better than mag carbonate, mag oxide, mag chloride, it is one amino acid, glycine.
Yep.
We are composed of 9 amino acids that we have to eat that we cannot make. And then like 11, 12 others that we can make from those 9, given the right circumstances, but it does take extra effort by the body. Your food has at least 16 to 18 different amino acids making up protein structures in the body. So magglycinate is not a protein bound magnesium. It is a single amino acid bound magnesium and 2 sites on a magnesium. And yes, while it gets it across the gut lining better, you don't have that cell specific delivery.
And that's why synthetic forms of these minerals were introduced, because of the information of branch chain amino acids, but they couldn't get them all to work. So let's just take one isolated one, chemically bond these 2 together, but it's missing the other fractions as you were mentioning. But for example, with our grown by nature magnesium, yes, there is lysine in there, but there's also the other isoleucine, I'm not going to ramble off the other 13, 14, but we have
whatever it picked up from the growth medium that the organism was in, which contains protein sources, carbohydrate sources, and they're all non-GMO sources, as opposed to being genetically modified corn, soy, and beet, which is the norm in a fermentation process across the industry.
Sadly it is. But it doesn't have to end with the consumer. We can, with this type of programming, with providing re-education out there, hopefully the consumer can make that appropriate decision. So I thank you for your time throughout this whole day today, talking, and I see a great future as far as getting this information out there. So thank you for that, first and foremost. And there's so many show topics that I'm probably going to hang up this Zoom call today and start writing down some topics, shooting them over to you. Let's work on this one next time. But thank you again.
I do think we have to really work hard to break down the difference between simple fermentation, which will form these matrices of starches and proteins and nutrients, but that versus what Andy spent so many years producing, which was very specific. Because there's a lot of stuff out there that's claiming to be the same. And yes, science can evolve. We can come up with better ideas. We don't always have to keep using the same thing, but let's get in some point into like making that distinction. What I remember about Grow Nutrients is they very specifically made sure every nutrient was inside the cell, bound and in the matrix of that cell, and no longer in the liquid medium. You don't want the liquid medium. It has all the waste products, as you pointed out. I learned that today. That gets cleaved off. The cell takes what's useful and integrates that, and it's no longer a waste product in your body. That's a huge service that it provides.
Yeah, the Grow company actually uses infrared spectrometers at the end of every batch to ensure that there was no carbonates or any USP synthetic isolates remaining within that batch, that it had all been properly consumed within that plant cell structure, and that the waste product is not existent. Their heavy metal report is virtually zero. There's absolutely no heavy metals found within their nutrients. Other companies that are selling even their isolated pharmaceutical brands, if you buy by the bulk, they list a heavy metal disclosure, and the allowable limit of lead or cadmium or mercury, it's in the parts per million. But when you take these supplements on a daily basis and higher dose than normal, or you're drinking your 5-hour energies, like that accumulates over time. The allowable limit, I say, should be zero across the board with these heavy metals.
Yeah, we're gonna get enough from our food without being able to avoid it. So awesome, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. Have a good day.
All right, you too. See you again soon.
All right, bye-bye.